The pro-Pauline message. Here we have it again. So God says to Peter, or the voice, or whatever is calling out from heaven. I've never heard this voice myself. But in any case, the voice crying out says to Peter, Peter, eat. What God has permitted, let no man set aside. And Peter finally says, yes, I have fun. And it's a noble conclusion. I don't deny it. I now have learned not to distinguish between pure and profane, nor call any man unclean. And now just at that moment, the Roman centurion's messenger comes to his door, and lo and behold, Peter can go and eat with him now. And then, in the Gospels, Jesus is at the tables with prostitutes, sinners, tax collectors, all kinds of impure people, and he eats with them. Keeps table fellowship with them. This is terribly noble. Except when you understand that the Herodians were the tax collectors in Palestine, and their princesses were known as the great fornicators in Palestine, and this all pro-Herodian propaganda. Because the resistance groups, the Dead Sea Scroll groups, and all the other groups who were messianic were preaching just the opposite point of view. Now, we love the other because we're the other and we want to be accepted and we want to be brought into the community. Okay, that's our wishes. But that's not history. We have to do true history. So where do we go? To the scrolls, the war scroll. I'm not saying I recommend the war scrolls. Hell, I think the Pauline position is great. I'm not going to go sacrifice my life in a hopeless war against the Romans. But that's not what these people felt. And they went to their deaths accordingly, and we must honor them, and so did all the others. So this is how it can help you. I'll say two more things. One more thing about why this is all important, and I'll take your questions. I was telling you there's a community rule that was in one of the caves, one of the materials found in Cave 1. It's an incredible document. It's very exclusive, by the way. It believes in expulsion and banishment and cursing, all the stuff Paul believes in, but it's not anti-Semitic. It's just anti the opposite group the way Paul is anti them. But it's very extreme and very, very beautiful in many ways. It has spiritualized temple imagery. It has all the imagery of the community council being a sacrifice, a holy essence, aroma unto God. Spiritualized sacrifice imagery that you get in Paul. And then at the end it says, this is the time of the preparation of the way in the wilderness. What? What? This is the time of the preparation of the way in the wilderness? I think I've heard that before. God, where did I hear that before? The New Testament, John the Baptist. And then it says, at the end again, it repeats it, and repeats the whole phrase, make a straight way in the wilderness, and so on, and repeats it verbatim. This is column 8 and 9 of the community rule. And then it says, I forget how it puts it, but this is the time of the, I could pull it out, but I don't want to break the train and go shuffling through a book for you. But basically it says, this is the time of the preparation of the way in the wilderness, and something to do with the zeal for the law, the zealots, the revolutionary groups, and the day of vengeance. So it's extremely apocalyptic, very vengeful, and very unremittingly militant. What do our Qumran scholars say? Community rule, handwriting. We analyze the handwriting. That's 2nd century BC. 2nd century BC, on what basis? Handwriting. But they don't have any exemplars of any handwriting at that time except the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's all manufactured at Harvard and the École Biblique. This handwriting supposed expertise. Internal data tells you, because other than that in the community rule is an organization just like the early church, it's vocabulary just like the early church, except it's just the opposite of the early church. It's exclusive, and it is, purity-minded, and so on and so forth. It's wilderness-oriented, but it's got Holy Spirit baptism in it, and it's got ritual immersion. I would place that document at the time of John the Baptist on the basis of internal evidence. And that's what I argue in all my work, that you have to go according to internal evidence, not according to authority. You have to read the documents. And you can't be deceived in what the deceivers are telling you. You have to go out there and do some work. Otherwise, you let them win. And once you once you do the work, you release a lot of other very good things. You release people's minds from a lot of negative authority. And that's what doing the work means, because if you want to go out there and really fight this fight, you've got to fight the people who are propagating the other side. And they're everywhere, as I told you. They're in a huge majority, and the literature backs them up. Only intelligence can win that fight. So this is, for me, what the study of the scrolls does. I've sort of encapsulated it in a nutshell. I want to answer one or two more questions on that point and then open it up to questions. Why did all this happen? Why did all this happen? Josephus, I think, tells us. He has a picture of John the Baptist that disagrees with the New Testament entirely. John the Baptist did not come to teach remission of sin in the wilderness. It wasn't remission of sin as the New Testament puts it. For Josephus, John taught righteousness and piety. Righteousness was love your neighbor as yourself. Righteousness towards your fellow men, the two love commandments. Piety was loving God. Love God. Josephus presents all the Essenes as observing those two requirements. Righteousness towards your fellow man, loving your fellow man, loving your neighbor as yourself, the love commandment, righteousness. And all the other prescriptions, bathing, all those other kinds of things that go into being an Essene, loving God. So Josephus said, he invited them to come to baptism provided that the soul had already been cleansed beforehand by the practice of righteousness. That's a totally different idea than we had. And then he said, baptism was for bodily purification only, the norm of these immersion groups. So baptism was not for remission of sin. Remission of sin came when you had all of it. Your soul being purified by the practice of righteousness, and immersion, baptism, was only the last point. And that's John the Baptist, historical John the Baptist. But the New Testament has transmogrified that into Paulinism, because it knows you don't know this. And then finally, Josephus says, Herod wanted to put John to death because he was so popular. Popular? Among who? Gentiles? Foreigners? No, Jews. He was so, but the Gospel of John and the Gospel of Mark have John